Next. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you're not a panelist at this time, if you don't mind turning off your video just so that we are able to have that kind of panel discussion. But please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions as the conversation goes on. Please feel free to use the chat button to also kind of go ahead and ask your questions in there. We have people monitoring the chat room, so we will be sure to kind of tie in your conversation into the conversation and ask, or your questions, and tie into the conversation, ask those questions as we go on. All right. Awesome. So again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Yanni. I recently graduated from Howard University College of Pharmacy. So if I have any HUs on the line, I appreciate you all joining us. I'm a medical affairs fellow at Novo Nordisk, and I've been in my role for about 3 months. So super exciting. And I have a lot to learn from this panel, just as much as everyone in the audience, and I'm sure the panelists as well. Just to kind of give you a little bit perspective on this panel, we actually had the first transitions of career panel that was brought to life by one of our ambassador coordinators. Her name is Dr. Star Shans. And it's because of her that we're here today. Honestly, it's her vision. So what we did is we moved that just from having a transition of career in pharmacy general to pharmaceutical industry, because we all know that the pharmaceutical industry, how to get into it, how to transition within it, when to transition. It's something that a lot of us have a lot of questions about, and that's why we have such a diverse panel here today to touch on all the different perspectives. So a little bit about PILS. PILS is, in short, created to really uplift and empower those that need representation within pharmacy. We want to make sure that that happens through connection, through coaching, and really just being able to connect and have that kind of family. And so we have several type of professional development opportunities, and this is one of them. I would like to do a shameless plug at this time and ask you all to please follow us on social media. PILS Connect is kind of our YouTube channel. PILS Connect is also our website. So make sure that you are tuning in and following. And my colleague Joshua just put it in our chat too, so make sure you're following us. So I will go ahead and just kind of start with introducing just the names, and then I'll let the panelists themselves talk about who they are and basically a little bit about background on themselves, give us a 1-2 minute introduction on who they are. So first I'll start with Dr. Ramon Kelly, who is a pharmacovigilance analyst at Kowa Pharmaceuticals America. So if you don't mind unmuting yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, like Yanni said, my name is Dr. Ramon Kelly. I grew up in Norfolk, Virginia, and I went to school at the other HU, Hampton University. Ooh, you can hear. All right, so basically I went to school, and during my tenure there, I ran track and field. So it was great balancing my schedule between tests and practice and competing. But after graduation, I got a role with Walgreens Pharmacy. So I was floating for a couple of months, about 3 months. Then I was placed at a store. And then I got my first official staff pharmacy appointment about a couple months after that. And we were a specialty HIV Hep C testing store. So I had to go through a certification for that. And about a year and a half later, I was able to transition to my current position at Kowa Pharmaceuticals America, where I am a pharmacovigilance analyst.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ramon, for that. And the next person we have is Dr. Wichita Lang. So if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Wichita Lang. Nobody calls me doctor. I graduated from Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre. Nobody really knows where that is, but it's Northeast PA. I finished up my PharmD and did a residency with the VA system. Went from there into a clinical staff position at a hospital in Pennsylvania. Moved into emergency medicine at a level 2 trauma center in Central PA. Moved into managed care, ambulatory care in Philadelphia. Moved into population health, AM care. And this will set you up for my section later on. So this is, not to embellish, but, a diverse array of different experiences. And prior to joining Novo Nordisk, I've been with Novo for about a year and a month now. But prior, I was with an ACO covering about 250,000 member lives. Oh, and I played volleyball in college, but I wasn't very good, so I had plenty of time to study.
We appreciate perspectives like that. I think it makes us feel better about life. So we appreciate it. And I appreciate that you said, nobody calls you doctor. So it makes it easier for me to say all the names on here if everybody's okay with that. The next person I have is Basirat, or Dr. Basirat Adeyemi, sorry, who's a senior manager in hematology oncology, global medical affairs at BMS.
Thank you, Yanni, and thank you to Pills for having me today. Yes, I am Basirat, so you can call me Basirat. I'm Basirat Adeyemi, and I like to work backwards. So currently, as Yanni mentioned, I do work at BMS, Bristol Myers Squibb, as a senior manager within global medical affairs. I'm still getting used to global medical because I did transition from regulatory. So prior to joining BMS, I was at Pfizer in global regulatory affairs. And prior to that, I was at Merck, where I completed my postdoctoral fellowship with Rutgers, also in regulatory affairs oncology. Prior to that, I was out in Harlem, where I went to pharmacy school and didn't do the traditional route. So I did also obtain my bachelor's at George Washington. And prior to that, I was back home in Nigeria, where I'm originally from. So thank you. Looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And next we have Dr. Travis Fisher, who is an executive director in medical affairs at Novo Nordisk.
Thanks, Yanni. It would take me a long time. I've been doing this for quite some time, but I'll give the very quick executive summary. I've spent almost as long in college as I have in my career. I spent 12 years between undergrad and various graduate schools, all to say that I got actually two degrees out of that. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and math, and then I went to graduate school in chemistry only to realize that working in the lab wasn't for me. Then went on to pharmacy school after a few years, and then completed a fellowship in regulatory affairs. I started in regulatory affairs because my entire CV said I was research and regulatory, and no one would hire me to do medical affairs. They didn't think I could talk to people. And so then once I got a job as a medical liaison, I moved around in medical affairs for a while, started and ran some fellowship programs at Procter & Gamble, then for about 7 years. And then I have spent the better part of the last 12 years at Novo Nordisk in a variety of different medical affairs roles, both in the field and home office. And as of September, am responsible for both the home office and field organizations for NASH. And so it's a new role, it's a hybrid role. And I guess one of the few things I can thank COVID for is the fact that we've gotten really accustomed to video conferencing. I don't have to move to New Jersey, and I can do it from Cincinnati.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, tell that to a fellow who started her fellowship virtually. I don't have the same sentiments, but it definitely is good to be home with the family for sure. The next person we have is Dr. Andrew Otu, who is a Vice President of Marketing and Global Commercial Lead in the pneumococcal vaccines portfolio for Merck. So please talk to us.
Well, first of all, good evening, folks. I'm so excited to be here. I'm very excited to learn from the panel. I love the themes of entering, advancing, and exiting. And very soon, I'm sure I'll be looking to exit into something fun. So I'm looking forward to learning. But I met Travis about 18 years ago. We were both fellows at Eli Lilly. I followed after him, so he was a role model for me. I'm currently at Merck. I'm the Vice President of Marketing, as Yanni said. And I've spent, as we just discussed, about 18 years in pharma. I've done a variety of different roles. I spent time as a fellow. I interned for Sharing Flowers as a sales rep when I was in college doing my PharmD MBA at Drake University in Iowa. I did a fellowship program at Eli Lilly, and after the fellowship program, I actually went into management consulting for just over a year, which was very, very transformative for me. We can talk about that later. And then came back into medical affairs for about 3 years, and I've spent the last 12 years in commercial roles. The last 5 years I was overseas. So I spent 3 years in France and 2 years in Japan, and now I'm back in the States. So it's been a phenomenal industry ride. There's so much more to learn and so much more to do, but again, very happy to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we're happy that you got the opportunity to travel before COVID happened. So that's really good. So the next person we have is Dr. EK OG, who is a Senior Equity Research Associate for Biotechnology for BMO Capital Markets.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Yanni. Thanks, Bill, for having me. Unfortunately, going after Drew is going to be kind of a hard act to follow. I don't have such an extensive career, illustrious career as him. I went to Howard University College of Pharmacy, just like Yanni. I also did the fellowship, Rutgers Fellowship, along with Bassi. Came out of there in 2018. I did business development and licensing at Bayer, 2-year fellowship. And as soon as I finished the fellowship, I transitioned to finance, to Wall Street equity research, to be more specific, because finance is such a large umbrella. And we can get into that later in the discussion. And I did equity research at Credit Suisse for a little bit over a year. And then I switched over to BMO, Bank of Montreal Capital Markets, where I'm at now. Will be about a year and a couple of months equity research as well, covering similar stocks, similar therapeutic areas. Again, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion and hopefully can pique the interest of some PharmDs and others to transition into the finance field, because we need you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, AK. So I think that what's on our minds when we think about it is why pharma, right? I mean, that's the first question that I was asked when I was interviewing for all these fellowship roles. So if you don't mind just kind of sharing your perspective, I will start from people that have been in pharma for a shorter period of time and then go into those that have been there for about 18, 20 years, like like Travis and Drew. So Ramon or Wichita or Basir, one of you guys can tell.
I can go. I unmuted first, so I get to go. You know, the journey for me into pharma was a little bit windy and untraditional. But why pharma? You know, I spent a little bit more than a decade working in various roles in clinical pharmacy practice, in kind of a management or advising position through health systems and managed care organizations and ACOs. And I think this is only my own take, so big asterisks, is as a pharmacist, there's certain ceilings that are unspoken in health system careers, right? And what I wanted to be able to do was really lean into strategic thinking, innovative problem solving, and work for a company that was solutions focused, right? And I think from the standpoint of where it made sense to transition within the realm of population health and the evolving healthcare landscape, pharma was one that was still kind of underdeveloped and gray, and that was very attractive for me. So why pharma? It's because I've come in to try to buck the trend and really challenge where we could fit in the pop health narrative.
Awesome. Thank you. Basti, you want to tell us?
Sure. So for me, I'll just explain my thinking at the time. You know, just coming from back home, Nigeria, I've always had this vision that I wanted to go into healthcare. So obviously I ended up in pharmacy. However, when I was in pharmacy school, you know, just working at Georgetown Hospital prior and then working at Columbia, I just felt that I could do more. And in terms of, you know, having an impact on the patient population, I felt, you know, going into the pharmaceutical industry, it would allow me to do that. But how I was going to get there, I didn't know. And, you know, I think it was fourth-year student that had come to talk to us during one of our dean's hour that I was forced to attend, and that's how I heard about the Rutgers Fellowship. And he kept on saying, if you want to, you know, be a non-traditional pharmacist, you know, and get to impact patients on a larger population. So that's what I heard, and I just ran with it. I was still a first-year student at the time, and you know, that's how I went about going into the pharmaceutical industry. So.
Awesome. And then we have Ramon, who recently just joined Pharma, well, actually during the pandemic. So what is that like?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Just to bring things full circle, Bob Surratt was the first Rutgers fellow that came to Hampton to talk about their fellowship program. At the time, I was not interested. I was just like, I just want to get done with school and go start making my money. But after a while, I think about my fourth year during the Appies, doing the rotational experiences. I had been an intern at Walgreens before and Rite Aid. I did the hospital internships, and I knew neither one of these were a fit for me. The best experience I had was at a patient advocacy Appy, and I was like, wow, I can really make a difference from this side, and I can see a greater reward for it. So after that, I knew I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to make this transition. It's gonna be difficult because I just graduated. I'm gonna have to, figure out a course for myself. But I've always been the type of person who I have to try everything and figure out if that's what's for me. I'm not sure if everyone else is like that, but once I got into this role, I was solidified like this is where I'm meant to be, and just the company and just the feel of it all is just amazing. So I wish COVID hadn't happened because I would be traveling, but it's a great feeling being in pharma.
Awesome, thank you. So Drew and Travis, I mean, you've known each other from back in the day, from the Visiting Scientist Fellowship days. So did you guys ever talk about why pharma back in the day when you joined? Tell us about what kind of led you into joining the pharmaceutical industry.
Travis, please.
I'm sure Drew is going to have a much more polished version of how he thought proactively about getting into the pharma industry. I'll be honest and say it was never anything that I thought about. And for that fact, neither was pharmacy. Because in undergrad, getting a chemistry degree and math degree, I went to a PhD program in physical inorganic chemistry, which sounds just as awesome as that. And after about 3 months in the program, what I realized is I went there because my advisors, my mentors had all told me, you're good at science, so go do this. What hadn't really clicked for me is the fact that just because I was good at the coursework didn't mean that I was going to enjoy working in the lab, and that was going to be my 24/7 existence for the next number of years. And after 3 months, I realized already that I was like, this is going to be a really long haul. And I started talking to some of my friends from undergrad that had gone to pharmacy school, and I'm very ashamed of this, but I'll tell you that I kind of made fun of them. I was like, well, I'll help you count by 5, 10, 15. And it just showed you I really didn't understand the world of pharmacy and what could be done with that. And so I was talking to them one day, and I was probably lamenting how bored I was and that people in the lab were really not very extroverted. And so basically I spent a lot of time talking to myself. And they start telling me about all the things that they were doing in pharmacy, the patient counseling, the fun they were having, what they were learning. And so they introduced me to the concept of fellowships, and I started doing some research. And it was from that my whole career trajectory changed, from working at Dow or DuPont as a chemist to wanting to work at Glaxo or Merck or whomever at that time. And so pretty much from that period, I decided I wanted to go to pharmacy school. And so once I got in, I never deterred from that path, from 4 years of pharmacy school to the point of completing the fellowship. And haven't regretted it for a second since.
So really great question. I was always good at chemistry. I enjoyed the sciences. I grew up in England and in Ghana, and so I did a lot of great. I had a lot of great experiences in school, and again enjoyed the science. I was thinking about dentistry or medicine, but wasn't prepared for that commitment. And so the PharmD program was just coming into effect in 1999, 2000. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to get a doctorate in pharmacy, which is based in chemistry and bio, and you speak to patients and you get a doctorate degree. And in the case of Drake, they had a joint PharmD MBA program, which I thought was really, really appealing, really attractive. So really the opportunity to leverage what I thought I was good at, but use it as a stepping stone into something else as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Drew. So I think that a lot of the times, when we think of making a decision to either get into a completely different role or, to step up the ladder and go to a role that is in the same field, but maybe a little bit higher, we still have to think about the time in terms of transition, right? So I think I want to kind of start the question off with you, Wichita, in terms of when did you know was the right time to kind of make that transition into pharma? I know that you and Ramon actually had a similar way of kind of obtaining the role or looking for a role. So I'm interested to know what that's like. I'm sure.
How did I know it was the right time? Because there was an opening that looked really cool. No, yeah, there was always this desire to challenge the notion of what I was able to do with the degree. The term top of license always comes to mind. And at the time I had just finished my MBA at Temple University in Philly. And I really wanted to be able to leverage it in a foreign industry, but one that was, going to provide unique lateral opportunities, vertical opportunities. And to be quite honest, I did feel before I even got in there that any skills, connections, or processes that I would learn in pharma was going to enhance and accelerate and expand the skill sets that I already had. So it was another opportunity for me to grow and learn. So I think the timing was right for me because I did start to feel a little bit stagnant in the concepts I was working in, the project teams that I was involved with. And I could have easily finished out my career where I was and continued to kind of churn through some of those projects, but I didn't have the same level of, like, I guess passion is a hokey way of saying it, but it didn't really resonate deep inside of me from a mission statement from where my skills were not being leveraged. And I felt like I could do it in pharma.
Awesome.
Oh, there's a second part. How did I find it? LinkedIn. Keep those LinkedIn profiles active. Keep your networks active. I had a buddy of mine who used to call on me from Novo. I sent him a cold email and said, there's this great opportunity for pop health management and the strategy and med affairs. Can you send my CV along? Applied, and I was able to kind of make it work. So, definitely I've had opportunities where I've been recruited, and this one specifically, I kind of went out and saw it.
And the means for that was LinkedIn mainly.
Yeah, the means were LinkedIn. And the reason I like LinkedIn over some of those other job boards is because it gives you a lot of opportunities to connect with either the recruiter who's posting it, second degree, first degree, network connections that work there or may know people that you could ladder up to. So it's more than just a static job post. And if you kind of buy up and get the next level of premium, you're able to get a little bit more insights and then just kind of write it off as a tax deductible expense.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I think in the same way that you did, Ramon also, I believe, got his role by kind of going on LinkedIn. So tell us a little bit about that, Ramon.
Yeah, I just saw the role, typed in pharmacovigilance and did not put a location. Wherever I was meant to be, I was meant to be. So it was probably on the second page. It wasn't popular, but I applied, and it was like one night after I got off of work, and I applied and sent my resume. And then about a week later, I got a call to schedule an interview. So yeah, definitely keep LinkedIn in the back pocket.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when we're talking about entering pharma, when we talk about early career, the same thing, that advice that you guys give is the same thing that Drew gave me when we had our conversation. So tell us, Drew, is there kind of, when it comes to using LinkedIn to figure out what's next for your career, is there a time where you stop using it, or is it always kind of a lifelong thing?
Yeah, it's definitely lifelong. I think, as Wichita said, about 5-6 years ago, I signed up for the premium version. and it just gives you a lot more capability of communicating with people. When jobs are posted, you can see salary details, location, the person who posted it. Interesting story. I was in Japan last year. The recruiter who had recruited me to Wyeth 12 years earlier sent me a note and said, I'm at Merck. There's some opportunities. Are you interested? She put me in contact with the hiring manager, but it was literally all through LinkedIn. So it's definitely something I would recommend. I think it is indeed a great investment, so that you can have a lot of great information to help you through your networking journey.
Awesome. And I think that it's also important to think about what about when you leave pharma, right? So EK, if you don't mind telling us, did you utilize LinkedIn or did you use other forms to kind of obtain a role in finance?
Yeah, I used everything under the sun, to be frank with you. However, I was fortunate enough to actually get my first job on the street through LinkedIn. You can tailor the jobs that you receive as something that you might find interesting. If you can, I mean, if you know exactly what you want, there's a lot of parameters. I don't know all of them off the top of my head, but you can put those inputs in there and you can find something that is quite attractive. And the Credit Suisse job came up. They gave me a call soon after, went through a couple rounds of interviews, and I was able to secure the job and actually got a couple of other on-sites through LinkedIn, but ultimately, decided to go with the Bulge Bracket Bank. But to answer your question, yeah, LinkedIn is definitely a go-to. I mean, even now, still have recruiters who will go into my inbox and say, hey, I got this job that might be interesting to you based off of your past experiences, your skills. So you're effectively, with your profile, make sure your profile's up to date and everything. You're recruiting without actively doing anything, right? So you're not going to these different job postings, different websites, and saying, looking for a particular job that you might find appealing. A recruiter can, just jump into your profile and say, hey, this particular person fits the mold for this position. So I'm going to reach out directly in their inbox. And also, in addition to some of the panels have been saying in terms of the premium version, definitely utilize that. I think they give you maybe, 3 months free or a certain amount of time for free. Use that time to do some LinkedIn stalking. So, go to everybody's different profiles and see how they might kind of portray themselves in maybe the jobs that they kind of have previously attained, and so what the responsibilities were. You also have, I think, a limited amount of direct messages that you can utilize outside of your network. So that's definitely good too. People are generally happy to have a quick chat with you or, answer a few of your questions. I mean, I know someone while I was at Credit Suisse who was able to directly reach out to the hiring manager who was the analyst, manager, director, rainmaker, the boss of the bosses, right? And because he did that, he was able to end up landing an interview and an on-site. So just be proactive and very intentional when you get on LinkedIn and try to find a job.
I'd also like to add, like, curating and updating your LinkedIn, it's an active, evolving platform for you, and it's a great tool, but, it's also something that you should be engaged with regardless of whether you're actively searching for a job, because the more prepared you are for the next opportunity, the more likely that opportunity is going to fit and you're just seamlessly going to be able to get into it.
So in a sense, you don't even have to wonder when is the right time. The right time kind of could just be that time that they approach you. It's kind of what you're saying. Awesome. So and talking about, transition even out of pharmacy, EK, I know that you mentioned, you kind of went out there and sought out the opportunity, but what even inspired you in the first place to go into finance, and how did you do it?
That's a fair question, Yanni. So I really have a strategic mindset. So this was something that transpired when I was in pharmacy school, kind of the early years. I knew I wanted to get into something that was business related, kind of investment related and involved, as I matriculated throughout pharmacy school. But ultimately, before picking AbbVie rotations, I decided that, when I run off to the sunset, I want to own my own angel investing firm. So I thought, what skills do I need to acquire? What experiences do I need to be effective and successful at that? And then kind of boiling it down, I saw I need finance experience because I previously didn't have any finance experience. So I looked at the pharmaceutical industry as a potential inroad for that. I did my stint at Lilly. George, who I think is actually on the line here, he has introduced me to someone. He was one of his mentors who was in business development. And he mentioned something that was just so profound to me at the time. He simply said, "Have you ever considered pharmacists on Wall Street?" So this kind of blew my mind at the time. So being me, I did my due diligence and figured out how can I potentially, get to that position, given the fact that I don't have any finance background. The business development and licensing opportunity at Bayer presented itself and really jumped off at the page for me when I saw that at Rutgers, simply for the fact that all the different, duties and responsibilities and experience that I have in terms of who I'd be interfacing with, the different skill sets in terms of valuation, really aligned with my ultimate goals, right? So I was able to secure that, fortunately. And even while there, I kind of have this very kind of rabid mind, like, what's next, plan this out, and one of the things I was looking at was, doing an MBA, going to M7. But I talked to a few people and they said, just get a job, stop trying to go to school all the time. And, I kind of weighed my different options. So investment banking was one, and that's under finance. So I think most people here are familiar with investment banking, the 100-hour work weeks and things of that sort. But ultimately, it looked unattractive once I did more digging. Fortunately, I was head of the alumni chair at Rutgers, so I had access to all these different pharmacists who went through the program, and we're talking CEOs of biotech companies. We're talking about lawyers, IP lawyers, people who are already on the street, and kind of held space with them, and had them pick my brain, pick their brain. Investment banking seemed like it'd be something where I just become what they call a spreadsheet monkey. I would virtually lose all of my pharmacy capabilities and insight that I learned. Equity research stood out. And simply for the fact that not only do you get that finance experience, but you also get to utilize all these things that you learned while in school, because you're covering stocks. The way I compare it, and not to go off in too much of a tangent, to come again, but I like to liken it to being an investigative journalist, where you're covering, say, a certain sector of the world, like the Middle East, and your companies might be countries like Yemen or Syria or something to that degree. And when something happens, you have to be reactive, and you can also be proactive, where say you think the president is up to no good and is being very untoward to his people, and you do some digging, you find out he's corrupt. So similar sense, like with research side, you feel like a clinical trial, it's going to have a data readout in maybe 2 or 3 months. You think it's going to be bad, it's not going to be statistically significant. Safety issues, efficacy issues, you put that out, gets traction, you look good, right? And so does the firm. But that type of line of work, where it was very, very appealing to me. And then even the exit opportunities, right? Because one big thing and one big takeaway that you should get from this vomit I'm doing is career optionality is key, and that's what she should always keep in mind. So you don't want to find kind of pursue a specific path where you end up finding yourself pigeonholed. And that's virtually kind of how I operate. Equity research, I can continue to do this for the next 5 to 7 years and find myself in a C-suite role at maybe a small biotech. I can jump back into pharma, do corporate development, business development, something commercial. I can go on the buy side, which is also into finance. So think about Fidelity Investments, these people who manage your 401ks, hedge funds, things of that sort. Like I can go to consulting. So that's one of the big reasons why I thought that, finance would really give me kind of a leg up in terms of, my career prospects. I hope that answered your question. Had to answer your question. I said a lot of things there.
Thank you for that, AK. I do appreciate that perspective. I think one thing that stuck out to me when you're talking is you mentioned connection and the importance of connection and kind of forming those relationships that get you to places that you haven't been in, or that kind of allow you to see certain things that you didn't see in yourself to kind of pull you in that direction. I think that's the reason I joined Pills, and that's the reason I'm still here, wanting to give back to the next generation of people. So I want to ask, on this call, we have about 7 people that are, including myself with the panelists, and out of 7 of us, there's only 2 that didn't do a fellowship, and that's Ramon and Wichita, to kind of single you out here. But for those that have done it, I guess I want to start with Bassarat. What was your intention, I guess, reason for doing a fellowship, and how has that journey been for you from a fellowship to now? I know you started in regulatory. Tell us about the challenges you faced even after that, having the connection and with the fellowship.
Thank you, Yanni. So the reason that I shared earlier in terms of how I heard about the fellowship through through somebody who was going to be a fellow the following year. And so when I did some digging, I realized, well, this would be my opportunity to get into the pharmaceutical industry, as opposed to going straight into the industry without doing the fellowship. And, I felt from my research, I noticed that the Rutgers, and I'm not trying to promote the Rutgers Fellowship here, but, I learned it was and it still is the oldest and the largest. And I felt, wow, well, if this company is, partnering up with, other pharmaceutical companies, that means by the time that I am done with the fellowship, that means I would at least, if I don't really talk to many people, that means I'll at least know maybe 5 people. Granted, Rutgers partners with, I think, 19 or even 20 now. And me being the talkative that I am, I do know at least people within at least 10 pharmaceutical companies. So I thought it was going to be a great experience for me to network and even, further enlarge my network. And so that was one of the reasons why I felt I should go into doing a fellowship. And matter of fact, I don't know if low-key is the word to say, but I did low-key didn't want to go straight into working, I felt this would be my opportunity to learn on the job. And, I still, till today, I still think I didn't leverage all the opportunities that the fellowship allowed me. So you did ask me the question about the challenges that I even faced trying to switch roles from regulatory to medical. So it was a couple. One of them, I was quick to realize that, oh my goodness, my preceptor did mention, there was this one medical opportunity at the time, and I didn't leverage it because I was so focused on regulatory. I just wanted to know the ins and outs of regulatory, which is great. However, if I had done it, then perhaps it wouldn't have taken me over a year to get my current role because, a lot of them wanted to know what were my experiences within medical. In addition to that, I wish I knew Travis at the time because I'm just learning Travis did a regulatory fellowship and you ended up in medical at some point of your career. For me, when I was looking, now I know of a couple of people, but for me, when I was searching, there wasn't precedent. There wasn't a lot of people. I didn't even know anyone who went from reg to medical. So it was challenging. And in addition to that, let's just be real, I didn't have the experience. And so for me, I really had to be creative in my way of explaining to interviewers that, listen, I do have the transferable skills. Yes, it was global regulatory affairs. However, when you look at global regulatory affairs and global medical affairs, I still work with all these cross-functional team members and still ensuring that regulatory is implemented appropriately into the programs that I sit on. And that's what we do within medical, as well as other things, but I was able to utilize that. I was able to talk to my strengths, my background training. I am a scientist, so in terms of engaging in conversations with these key opinion leaders and whatnot, and having these scientific conversations, it wouldn't be a problem for me because I am a pharmacist. And then I also leveraged my strength. I enjoy, it's something I'm passionate about when it comes to establishing relationship with folks. And I always speak to, when I was at Pfizer, I was having one-on-ones like almost, and I was sharing this with you, Yanni. I was having one-on-ones almost every week, meeting somebody new. I networked up until even our CEO had a one-on-one over coffee with him. So, I was able to speak to my strengths of winning others over. And I felt that is, or believe that that is something that is key within medical affairs, because again, you are talking to these thought leaders. These are people who conducted the clinical trial. You have to have some form of relationship with them to be able to interact with them. And so I was able to speak to my strengths, and I thought that helped me. Another one thing that also was a barrier is that even with the interviewers that I was interviewing with, a lot of them were not knowledgeable, well-versed as to what we do within regulatory, or what I did at the time within regulatory. And so when I would, answer these behavioral questions and I'm pulling out responses from my regulatory experience, they would just keep looking like it felt like I was speaking Latin. And so to me, that was also a barrier. So I really needed to articulate myself well and letting them know, like, listen, I may not have the experience. However, I do know the role in and out. I understand it at least. And this is what I can do. So that was what helped me. So I don't know if I answered your question, and I also leverage obviously relationships that I had built over the years, and that also helped me. And sorry to piggyback, I know a lot of us talked about LinkedIn, but I would also mention, yes, you can find roles via LinkedIn, but you can also find roles from those failed interviews, those interviews that did not lead to roles. Keep in contact with them, like make sure. They should call me the Miss Follow-Upper, because I always followed up. Like, there was a role I didn't get, I'm always emailing them like, hey, hi, just checking in, so always stay in touch with them. You never know what help you may be of to them, or vice versa. So yeah, thank you.
And I'm so happy that you ended it on that note, Basseret, because one of the things I loved about our conversation is that when we go on LinkedIn and we look at people's profiles, it's always like, you went from Merck to BMS to Pfizer, and it's so impressive, and it's at the same time overwhelming to people who didn't have experience. So maybe Ramon could also tell us a little bit about how that was like. But I think one of the things I really loved is that, you really still were able to persevere and kind of push through regardless of the rejections you got, and how those led to additional opportunities. Another thing I kind of want to touch on a little bit is that you kind of mentioned about, being focused on regulatory so much that you did not necessarily have, like you did not spend as much time in medical, or, your focus was very strong on regulatory. And from my conversation with Drew, I think one of the things you mentioned to me in terms of, not having limitations on where you want to go is having the bird's eye view of the pharmaceutical industry and what you do. So if you can kind of tell us, Drew, a little bit about those type of things that are required for somebody. It's not just a skill. It's not just about knowing medical or regulatory, right? But it's more so other things. So tell us about those other things that are key to have, skills that are key to have in order to be able to transition within pharmaceutical industry without any issues, or with issues. But
Sure. So I think, one important thing for all of us is for you to always remember the power of the degree that you have. To have a doctorate in clinical pharmacy offers you a lot of versatility. So if we think about pharma and biotech, and even if you broaden the ecosystem to what Ike was describing, I spend a lot of time speaking to our analysts, and there are some knowledgeable people, right? These are PharmD, PhDs that are digging into therapeutic areas, company profiles, stocks, and if you take a big picture look of pharma or biotech plus or minus the financial industry, the quicker you are able to learn about how these pieces fit together, the quicker you'll be able to navigate through the industry and then decide or experiment different roles. So one of the things that Lilly did was they took the fellows And then they had us teach a class at Butler University on drug development. So we took a fictitious asset from the bench all the way to post-licensing commitments. And we had to teach other pharmacy students. And by so doing, we had to learn from our preceptors and other colleagues that we were speaking with at Lilly. So that gave me an understanding of literally how an asset moves through the organization. Bench, lab, regulatory, manufacturing, clinical, marketing, sales, market access, post-licensing commitments, pharmacovigilance, end of LOE. And so that would be my advice. My advice would be to learn as much as you can, as Bassaret said. And I tell my colleagues, my team members, every week I'm meeting someone. And frankly, in the pandemic world, you can do what we're doing now, 30, 45 minutes. People love to talk about themselves. You know, you listen, you learn. But I think the more you learn, the more you recognize the strength of the degrees that you have, the faster you'll be able to navigate. My experience, and I'll end on this, one of my experiences is it's easy for people to tell you why you can't do something. And that's either because that's not something they're comfortable with, that's not a pathway they've gone on, so they will like to impose their restrictions on you. So my advice to all of you is, don't let anyone tell you you can't do marketing. Marketing is science. Marketing in business is science. You have a hypothesis, you test it, you experiment, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Last time I checked, that's the definition of science. So, you know, there are a lot of similarities, and I would just, again, ask all of you to really be empowered with the degree and the experience that you have. It's very versatile.
And I just want to jump on there real quick, Drew, drill down some key things that you said there in terms of the versatileness of the PharmD and the fact that a lot of the people outside of our world doesn't really know what a PharmD does. I know, speaking from a finance standpoint, I had to have kind of a long conversation with different recruiters for these different banks because they saw the PharmD and they didn't know how to scale me in terms of scale them like an MD, scale them like a PhD, and that's something that happened as well on the industry side. And so it's really key to understand that the PharmD, personally, I feel like it's a healthy mix of both those highly coveted kind of degrees, that being PhD and MD, right? You have the MD, very clinically focused, and you have PhD that's very, siloed and very, a lot more scientific, and PharmD kind of couples them both in a happy marriage. And, with that knowledge, your capabilities kind of, transcends a lot of the things that the other folks think you can't do. And you'll be surprised what you're capable of, as you mentioned, in terms of, taking in how a drug goes from a science project to being, worth $2.5 billion in annual sales year over year, right? And it's going to take some time, but I'm personally starting to see the effects of us really taking our PharmD and going these non-traditional routes, and actually showing up and showing out, right? I see some of these job postings now that say we're looking for MD, PhD, and PharmD. Right? I saw that at Credit Suisse for like an investment banking position, and that's literally the first time I ever saw that for an investment bank, let alone a bulge bracket investment bank. Again, continue to strive for positions that you really don't see PharmDs operating in. You'll be surprised how successful you can be.
Yeah, if I could add on to those points as well. And Drew, you took me back when you talked about teaching the classes, because honestly, I think one of the biggest things that we took away from the fellowship is that holistic view of drug development from beginning to end. The ability as a fellow to be able to network with all these people in all these roles. It's almost like your full-time job was networking and learning over the course of the fellowship. So when you came out of it, you were able to better direct your own career. Part of it, and I know Drew shares a lot of this from his experiences in medical and regulatory and everything else, is over the course of my career, I started in R&D with, it was Philip Morris at the time, then Altria, regulatory affairs, medical. The part that I left out is probably one of the pieces that has been the most impactful throughout my career, is I launched a product in professional marketing at Procter & Gamble. And in that role, I learned so much that I still apply in my job each and every day. And part of that is how to evaluate the business side, because I think it was EK that talked about, he didn't have the business or finance background, neither did I. And so for me, that was my fire hose experience of learning the business side and being able to do that. And particularly when someone with a science background comes into a room and then can articulate the business, it gets people to pay attention, because they may know the business, but they're not going to be able to talk the science in the same way. And so very quickly, you can establish a credibility that will carve any number of paths for you. And like Drew, I will leave you with one piece of advice, and I can tell you that I have never failed. And that's because I choose, when if something doesn't go the way that I thought it should or that I wanted it to, I've chosen to learn from that experience. And as long as you do that and you pick yourself up, it's not a failure. It is one more learning experience that is going to help you craft who you are and then ultimately what you bring into positions. And so don't be afraid to try something new, because if it's out there with enough will and focus behind it, you can do pretty much anything.
I love that. And actually, Joshua, who is our chairman for PILS, said fail forward. So I love that. And it's definitely something that makes me happy to hear as a fellow. I think that each day you feel like a failure, especially when you're at home, you don't really see what's going on in the office. So that's really something that really helps push us forward. In the same context, I know you mentioned the importance of business acumen. And I think that a lot of us feel like business acumen is obtained through an MBA or something like that. And so out of the panelists today, we have two people that have their MBA, and that's Wichita and Drew. And I would like your perspective in terms of what that degree did in terms of, improving your business acumen as expected. But then also I think we have Ike, who didn't necessarily have an MBA, but then went into finance, a whole entire business area. So I kind of want to talk about how do you, obtain when do you know is the right time to go for that degree? And do you need that degree to build your business acumen? And any of you can jump on that, which is how, if you would like
Wichita, please. Go
Oh,
ahead.
thank you. Thank you. I had the opportunity to pursue an MBA while in pharmacy school, and I passed. And I had some credits, and if I would have spent like 2 more semesters, but I passed on that. I did not see a path from where I was at with the MBA to anything that would be substantively different in the near term. I was working in my emergency room clinical role, and I had another opportunity to do an MBA, and it was going to be subsidized. I was like, oh, that's great. It was again something that, relative to getting out of school, I just put in all this time. It made sense from the the next step, but I didn't have any logical reason to go get it. And I had been with then I transitioned to my managed care company at Cigna HealthSpring, and having been exposed to the business aspects of healthcare delivery. And I was doing AmCare for an insurance company essentially, and was able to get brought in to advise on, quality measures, got exposed to, the different business aspects of the market. How's our membership looking in Philadelphia? What's our, overall net profit? Are we losing people year over year? So all these terms and jargon, I'm like Googling it throughout all the meetings, and I'm like, I obviously have a basement of understanding of business terminology, and I could do my own YouTube self-study. And what dawned on me was that the MBA was going to not only give me the didactic formal education in business, but the way I did it was non-virtual, but by going on campus and really getting shoulder to shoulder part-time with other younger middle of the road professionals who were looking to advance, kind of creating an organic network of peers across different industries, across different verticals and at different stages of their careers to really enhance the perspective of, you know, what there is in the world in a format that was going to be friendly to poking and prodding and no non-judgment zone. And how I knew it was right is because I knew that I wanted to learn more in that realm. I don't think everybody needs an MBA, so I wouldn't advocate that you just everyone go out and get one. But for me, it really provided that foundation, the accelerated network that I was looking for, and potential. Like, and honestly, in applications, a PharmD MBA does stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, you know, very similar to Wichita's point of view. You know, entering into pharma is very competitive, and I also wanted the maximum return on investment for, you know, the money I was spending on my education. So for a PharmD MBA to be offered, Drake also had PharmD JD degrees, but the MBA was more in line with my entrepreneurial intent and what I was looking to do. But I knew that going after an MBA that early in one's career also has pros and cons, right? It's also great to go to a Harvard or an Ivy League school or Yale, and that opens up different opportunities, you know, later in your career. But when I completed the PharmD MBA, I was also very intent on developing further credibility from a business standpoint. So that's part of why I did the fellowship. I did a marketing fellowship at Lilly. The first time in 2003, Eli Lilly was going through downsizing. So there was a very low likelihood that I'd retain a job, a full-time job. So a colleague introduced me to management consulting, right? So another non-traditional arena, very similar in a way to the analyst point of view that Ike was sharing. You're bringing highly trained individuals to do specific jobs. In this case, for me, it was pharma and biotech. So it was like boot camp, right? You know, I was a freshly minted PharmD MBA. I thought I was like on top of the world. And then they threw me in the first 3 months with management consulting with other freshly minted MBAs, and it kicked my tail. I mean, everything from PowerPoint, Excel, research, consultative interviews, oral presentation, and it was very transformative. The skills I learned in management consulting have stuck with me today. So, you know, as colleagues think about, you know, MBAs or various non-traditional degrees, the most important thing is learning, right? It took me 12 years, and over that period of time, I was learning to be more conversant with the P&L, right? So, you know, as a market and aspiring marketing commercial person, I had to build that credibility, but I had to learn it and I had to do it until I could dream and think in a P&L. But I literally had to sit down and study and watch analysts and read analyst reports. So it's a learning journey. Do you need an MBA? No, but you're gonna have to put effort to learning a new vernacular, as Basret and others have said.
Absolutely.
Drew, if I could just add on to something you shared there with P&L. So many folks here may not know what a P&L is, so profit and loss. And as someone who I'm most of the way through an MBA and most of the way through an MHA, 2 different times, actually multiple different times, I moved every 2 years or less for the first 16 years of my career. And so I like being live for things with people. And so I would start a live program and then I would move for work. And so I haven't completed either degree, but the point you made, Drew, I think is imperative, which is learning. What I learned from the MBA courses was I learned how to read the Wall Street Journal better. It's like demystified a language, a vernacular that before I could read it, but it didn't mean the same. And now all of a sudden it meant something different. In the MHA, I found a knowledge base that I could immediately apply to my work. And so the difference is the MBA made me better personally and financially. The classes, the MHA made me more innovative in the work I was doing on a day in, day out basis. And so depending on what your intent is and what your objectives or goals, then it could it could play a difference, but there's no substitute for the learning, however you achieve that learning.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that, oh, go ahead. Yeah, Ike.
Yeah, I'll jump in here since you asked kind of like my path of getting to the street without MBA. And as I mentioned before, while I was at Bayer doing BD, I was considering getting an MBA just simply because I knew, I mean, the doors that it effectively just not knocks over, but just tears it off the hinges, right? If I come in there with a PharmD and an MBA from Harvard, Columbia, so on and so forth, and kind of given the person I am, I really didn't want to have anything that anybody can hold against me as I was entering into this industry that I think we're all kind of familiar with. It is not very representative of the population. So I didn't, again, I just wanted to have, a full armamentarium of things that I can just deploy to get to these certain positions. But I got a lot of mixed reviews from people in terms of, getting an MBA kind of so soon. The same guy that talked about Wall Street, a pharmacist. And I said, I want to go to Harvard for MBA. He said, are you the person in Nigeria? Good luck, because you don't have enough experience. So as was mentioned before, in terms of Travis saying about it, it really does matter about the intent. You really have to see how the MBA, how you can leverage the MBA, is going to help you in your career. I think unequivocally having an MBA is nice. It will boost your resume, at least if you compare to somebody without an MBA, right? But as Drew mentioned, which I mentioned as well, it's not absolutely necessary. Right, I decided ultimately to just do the trial by fire and kind of looked at business development, my 2-year stint there as my MBA, because it offered one of the really most powerful things that MBAs do offer, especially if you do it full time, is the networking piece, right? As Basi mentioned, Rutgers has hundreds of fellows, and I did definitely try to interface with as much of them as I could. Took advantage of the alumni pool. And kind of feel like I established a nice, neat network. Granted, it's not as diverse as it would be if I had actually went pursue an MBA, but nevertheless, it's still sufficient, I think, for my short-term, medium-term goals. And in addition to that, as I mentioned before about LinkedIn and how powerful a tool it is, I do a lot of LinkedIn stalking. Even now in my job, I look at a lot of different managements for different pharmaceutical companies, small biotechs, so on and so forth. And I just really study, their background, where they come from, what degrees they have, things of that sort. And I definitely saw there was a trend of a number of folks who, attained positions that, I thought were feasible in my, long-term future, who didn't have an MBA. They didn't go to one of these target schools. So it's one of those things where if you don't see it, it's hard to imagine getting there, right? So I definitely saw enough individuals in these high places that inspired me to say, you know what, I can put this on the back burner. If it comes to a point where I absolutely need it, then I'll do what I have to do. Ideally, go to a pharmaceutical company, have them pay for it. But nevertheless, it has been done, as clearly what the records have shown. So I'm going to act accordingly.
Awesome. Thank you for that, EK. And what about Ramon and Bassarat? Have you guys considered potentially getting an additional degree? Is that ever a thing that you guys see yourself doing? I know that Ramon, you kind of recently joined, so I'm already asking for a lot. You're like, let me just get adjusted to my role. But have you thought about it? Have you considered it? And what are you learning from people that are telling you right now what they're saying?
Want to go, Ramon?
Yeah, I'll go. Thanks, Bassarat. It's in the back of my mind, either an MBA or MPH. I have not decided which one yet. But at my company, because it's so small, it's not really needed. If I wanted to switch into a different functional area, I would just have to show interest, because there are about 3 people within the company who switch between what is needed to complete our job. So like our VP, she was within clinical research and she ended up switching to regulatory. There's someone who was in pharmacovigilance and switched to marketing. So it's kind of up and down. It's determinant on whatever our company needs or wherever you express your interest. But for now, I'm just gonna do like I'm kind of tailoring my own fellowship here, but getting advice from everyone, just meeting everyone within the company through marketing, medical information, medical affairs, and quality and assurance. But I think I'll probably end up going and getting a second, probably leaning more towards the MPH.
That's good. So I'll follow up with you in a little bit and see where you are. What about you, Besseret?
Yeah, thank you, Yanni. So for me, I have a lot of student loans to pay back. So right now, MBA or any further advanced degree is not on my mind. However, it is an aspiration of mine. I have lots of aspirations. I mean, I shared with you what I do outside of work, which is a lot of craft like sewing and whatnot. So I've always had, you know, a passion to actually go to fashion school. Or if I find somebody to pay for it, maybe. And then I do have an entrepreneurial spirit. So I would love to get an MBA, more so for the networking opportunity, because I've, you know, just as it's been shared on the call, you can go to any school, but sometimes it really matters what school you go to, just because of the folks that you're going to be sitting in class with. And I'm a networking guru, so I would love to leverage that opportunity when that time comes, but not right now.
Oh, it wasn't I. I was doing so well. So I think that one thing Travis mentioned in terms of moving and kind of having to switch between different places. And one thing that I wanted to ask about that is, and speaking with Drew too, one thing you said that really stuck out to me is the kind of transformation that happens after disruption in some way, shape, or form. So I first want to kind of ask Travis if you can talk about that move, the constant move in your career, and how family played a role in that. And then Drew, if you can chime in as well, that would be great. And then I have some questions from audiences, so I'll start asking those before they start wondering when I'm going to ask those.
Yeah, so early on, and for the first 10, 12 years of my career, every time is, other than searching for the fellowship and searching for the first job, I didn't search for another job. As someone would come and say, hey, would you like to do X? And every time I saluted and said, yes, whatever the business needs dictate, just sign me up. And so that had me living in Boston and Washington, D.C., and Indianapolis and Cincinnati multiple times. Had me living in New Jersey. And finally, and part of it, and maybe many folks have kids, once we started having kids and they got old enough to actually have a voice, the next move that I was right on the cusp of saying yes to was to Denmark. And when I broached that with my kids, and we had only moved 8 months prior, they said no. And for the first time in my career, I said, okay, no, thank you. 2 years later, and it's very interesting, I didn't realize Drew had been in Japan. As 2 years later, I had a chance to go to Tokyo. And I went there for a week, evaluated the opportunity, came back, and again said no thank you. Since then, I've moved 4 times within my own company in different types of roles. But it's one of those where, again, having to balance what you need professionally and what you need personally, and the other loved ones in your life, really does play a role in the decisions you have to make. And so I don't regret saying no to those. It's now quite easy for me to say no to things, or much easier than it was in the past. But being able to pick what's really true to the core of who you are is most important.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Travis. And yeah, what a great question. I'm just trying to think of the most efficient way to answer it. So I think all of us, as we just discussed, we're all lifelong learners. And so we are going to have to, it helps to set some specific goals. You know, what do you aspire to? Like Ike said, I don't like to be told no, or I don't like to feel that I'm somehow inferior in what I bring to the table. So for me, I kind of looked at the commercial organization. I'm like, I couldn't do this stuff. It's not rocket science. And I do have a PharmD and I have an MBA as well. Like I think I can do this. And so for me, it was partly being very clear, or at least having some semblance of clarity about what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into marketing. Well, what kind of marketing? Well, maybe global marketing. Within global marketing, launching a product, at some point in time, leading a team, at some point in time, leading a region, leading a therapeutic area. And, a number of years ago, that seemed like that was crazy. I could never do this, but I just set myself step by step. I surrounded myself with great people. So a number of seminal times in my life came from people offering me opportunities. Greg Little, who brought me to Navi Medical Affairs. Folks like Greg Reeder that asked me one day, hey, I know you said you wanted to go overseas. Well, listen, I got a thing in France for 3 years. What do you think? In France, I had an opportunity to then go to Japan to lead a business. So throughout the journey, it's been people. Family played a role. My family had a little bit of trepidation going to France. They had a lot of trepidation going to Japan. When they came to see me in Japan, unlike Travis's experience, they were like, get me out of Paris, we're going to Tokyo. So it's family, timing, definitely growth comes only after disruption. So you're going to have to take some risks. One practical thing, some advice. I interviewed for new roles every 2 years. I was always looking outside. Even while I was at Pfizer for 12 years, every 2 years I was interviewing. I was looking at job descriptions, curating job descriptions, memorizing them, and always ready with a star, having my star story. So even before I took a project, I was already thinking, hey, what's my star story that I'm going to have to tell Basirat, who is going to try and hire me, in some time later. So situation, task, action, result, always. And if you do that enough, you can go on Google and look at the top 20 star questions, like get that down cold. And whatever you're doing, regulatory, quality, whatever, just always have your star ready. And I think the other advantage of looking at job descriptions is you see what people are looking for. And again, that helps to inform the types of roles you take and the projects you take, because again, you're thinking of your star and how that's going to ladder up to get you where you want to get to. So, just some thoughts I wanted to share.
I'm super glad this is being recorded because we tell a lot of our P4 students right now to use the STAR method, and some of them are not listening. So at the level that you're on when you're telling us to use the STAR method, and even as a VP level, that's something that you still use. I hope that for those that are listening, make sure you are, buckling down and getting your STAR down. So I kind of want to get into the audience questions now. And the first one, I kind of want Ramon to touch on that. So this is a person who, sees that you went from retail going straight into pharma. And they want to know, how did you transition? Like as a recent graduate with a retail pharmacist role, what is the best entry level roles to help tap into pharma?
I leverage my network, of course, that everyone does. I spoke with a lot of my classmates who did do fellowship, and they connected me with other fellows, and they gave me a lot of advice that even though if you don't get a fellowship, you can still transition through entry-level roles or through contract positions. So that was a lot of what I was researching and looking into on LinkedIn. But based on my personal experience and my background, I was able to take like drugs of abuse electives, toxicology, PK. So I kind of knew that I would be more into safety based on my preference of what I liked in school. So I narrowed it down to that, but I also did take certifications through IPHO and another certification class just to get a better foundation of pharma. And when I did have those interviews, I could speak to that and just show my enthusiasm for wanting to learn a new role, because I knew at my current position as a pharmacist, I wasn't going to go any further because I didn't have any aspirations of being a manager or a district manager. So I wanted to translate my skills that I had learned from there and then use them in a new role. So I would say definitely look into certifications. They're not going to guarantee you a position, but they'll make you a better candidate so you can stand out in those interviews and you have something to talk about.
Awesome. I love that you mentioned the courses, especially when you're in school too. I think some of the things that right now when we're looking at CVs, relevant courses are not something that we see, but I love that. And certifications, yes, but also whatever you learned in school is going to still apply and still help you. So I love that you said that. In the same realm of kind of entering into pharma, the next question would be for you, Wichita. And this is from someone that's saying that they have a clinical pharmacy specialist who are residency trained, and they want to know, how do they make their CV stand out and catch the eye of an HR recruiter when applying for jobs? And they also have, taken the bullet and got a premium on LinkedIn. So just to kind of give you a back.
Yeah, I think how do you make your CV stand out? It's a really tough one, especially when you're outside of industry and trying to get in. It's not a bubble, it's like a wall. And I've been in those situations before too, trying to come in as an ML, trying to come in to sweep the floors. It's really difficult to come into pharma, but the CV really does need to speak to the attributes of what you're looking to do within pharma. If your role is an ML and you're really good at engaging, you're really good at kind of distilling science and communicating that well to stakeholders, you know how to navigate relationships, and you're able to kind of travel, and you're open to constant learning and that agility, your CV needs to speak to the skill sets that are going to get you the job. With regards to recruitment, it's definitely a lot harder to get pulled through from recruiters when you don't have the industry experience. Lean into that network, have active, engaged networks that are always looking out for you. I know, like at Novo, there's openings that come through, and if you're top of mind for your connection, then they're gonna sub Xavier. So you're gonna be able to get in there, and
we have a webinar on.
All right, I'm done, but I'm cool with that.
We were doing so well. Now, go ahead, which is.
No, I'm just saying, you have to be your own recruiter at times, and I think having an entrenched network that's looking out for you, that people, that you trust, that know your skill set and can speak to you without you asking them to. I think that's the kind of seed networking can plant.
Awesome. And again, in the same realm of the transitioning into pharma, for both of you guys, what is the work-life balance like in pharma compared to, well, I guess I want to kind of start with you, which is that compared to clinical, and then the same thing for you, Ramon, and compared to retail.
Clinical, depending on the practice site. So, AmCare, emergency, critical care, all the, trauma, neuro, like all those sites, it's a pre-specified hours of operations. You kind of do your work, you show up, maybe you're working on some side projects once in a while, and then you're home predictably. Typically with clinical roles, there's no weekends that you have to work on certain roles and companies. With pharma, it's a little bit more fluid. I think there's still a lot of traditional hours. The way I look at it is, work-life balance, where I've found the balance to be more about, it's not about balance, about integration. It's work-life integration. Am I spending the 40 hours a week or whatever it is a week doing something that's actually valuable to me, to my personal professional growth? So I could do 40 hours and be home on time, but I was pretty miserable. So it's like, we got to be able to think about the value sets that you're matching time against. And it's not just, to some people, maybe that's the most important attribute. That for me, it was not. So I'd be willing to do a little extra here and there. I was doing side hustle while still doing clinical anyway. So it was just kind of like wrapping it all up.
Awesome. What about you, Ramon?
Night and day, definitely night and day. Yeah, retail is stressful. But I would go in early to get things ready. We opened at 9. I would go in at 8 to get things ready for the day. Something unexpected happens and we're behind. So, you know, you have to catch back up and then make sure that maybe the next day it's good for your partner. So it's not like too hectic. And then, you know, it's kind of like it's like a tussle. You give most of yourself and you don't get a lot of yourself back. And at times I was like, oh yeah, I did that. You know, I came in and I cleaned it up, but it was just like, I can't do this for the, you know, rest of my life. I can't even foresee myself doing this for the next 5 years. But in pharma, it's just, everything you do is more appreciated in a sense. You know, things are gonna get done in a timely manner and no one is kind of like over your shoulder. You have that flexibility to do whatever you want, but at the same time, you're expected to get your work done. So it's that autonomy piece that you have. You know, it's like you're a piece in this bigger of a piece in a whole, but everyone is counting on you to do your part. But at the same time, everyone's there to help you. So it's not like you're alone in this. So I can always call my coworker like, hey, I have this adverse event that it's really big. Can you help me with this? But or it's looking through literature and searching, and that's always the worst. But it's a great learning experience though. I'm fortunate and grateful for this opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think that I have a few people asking about the certifications that you took to make yourself a better candidate. So if you don't mind typing it in the chat,
Yeah.
I don't want to have this thing.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. And of course, everyone on here, you guys see their names. So please make sure that you follow up with them on LinkedIn as well. So the next set of questions that I have is for those that are within pharma. So we've kind of done our conversations and questions in terms of into pharma. The next set is, like I said, for those that are in pharma, I want to ask, like, this is a question from an audience, how do you weigh your career decision, given for those that have breadth, for those, you know, how do you make sure that you have all these choices? And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but this is also for Bassarat. You know, you're thinking about what is the next move for me? How do I get there? How do you make those decisions? What are key things that a person should be thinking about when they make those decisions? And if we can start with Bassarat and go into Travis and Drew, that would be great.
Sure, thank you, Yanni. So for me, I'm still early in my career. You know, I just graduated 4 years ago. But when I was within a regulatory, I knew it that I wasn't going to be in regulatory for the next 10 years or 5 years even. And I remember you asked the question, when is the right time? And so for me, I kept on asking myself like, oh, when's the perfect time? When is the perfect time? But I couldn't figure out what the perfect time was because I didn't know what was going to be next. And really it was just from having these one-on-ones with people, you start to learn because you don't know what you don't know, right? But from having these one-on-ones with people, it really, exposed me to other roles that were out there. And then I was quick to realize that, oh, okay, somebody was talking, but I was quick to realize that, you know, my strength, I'll be able to utilize it and provide more value in a medical role. And so how I was going to get to that next role was really what I needed to focus on. And eventually when I was networking with people, I said, you know what, I can do this. And, you know, I just took that risk and went for it. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. What about Travis and Drew?
I'm gonna have Drew go as my dogs are barking at my front door.
All right, Travis, I'll cover for you. So, you know, this is a really interesting question. It's interesting because if you strip away the titles, there are basic elements of the roles that we do that are quite common. You need to be able to motivate people, get people to do things for you. People need to like working with you. You need to be dependable. Are you a good communicator? Can you get things done, right? So whether you're in quality assurance or regulatory or medical affairs or pharmacovigilance, there are certain things that you just need to be able to do. And the reason it's interesting is at a certain point, I could today move into a medical affairs role or regulatory affairs role. And even if I'm not a technical expert, there are a number of things that are very important to be able to get organizations and people to work together. Are you invested in people? Do you develop people? Can you mobilize people? Can you create a vision? Can you create a strategy? Can you get things done, right? So again, depending on, regardless of the hat that I'm wearing, those are very transferable skills. And I think that the sooner we recognize that as pharmacists, again, remember, we have a very versatile set of tools, and that allows us to transition into different roles. Sometimes that's scary. Sometimes people will say, oh my God, that's non-traditional, you can't do that. There's nothing stopping you, right? So, you know, as you think about transitioning from role to role, you know, I have mentors that have told me, Drew, there are 3 things you need to look at when considering a role. Are you gonna learn? Are you gonna have an impact? And are you gonna have fun, right? And sometimes you might not know the answer to all 3 of those questions. But again, it goes back to something I shared earlier, which is at least having a sense of kind of the direction or the role model that you want to emulate. So if I emulate, you know, the VP of medical affairs, and I kind of look at that person's background, I'm probably gonna see, at one point they started as an individual contributor, and they were probably knocking things out of the park. And, you know, they generated a reputation of excellence, a reputation of dependability, likability. They probably were very good at influencing and working with people and in teams. They may have managed people or not. And they may have had a breadth of experience. They may have spent some time in oncology, some time in immunology, vaccines. They had a breadth of experience. So being able to peg someone and say, I kind of want to do like what that person is doing, gives you a sense of the types of things to learn and to acquire that will help you're filling a bag of tricks, and you're kind of going over time. And over time, you want to be able to kind of look at your bag and say, you know, I have many of these skills. Sometimes you have to take lateral moves. Sometimes you might have to go down. You might have to jump ship. But again, it's this continual learning journey. It's momentum. You're always moving. And I think that's key. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. I think that one thing that I remember you said about even, you know, the ability to just be likable. I mean, you know, me and my co-fellow Beatrice, we're looking at candidates now, and when we interview them, that's one thing that we want to look at is, can they work with people? Do they have that personality on top of their certifications and credentials and all of that? So that's very important. I think another thing is having the trust of your team. So I kind of want to ask you to kind of just talk about a little bit. You know, I asked you once, how do you kind of get rid of that doubt that you have when you want to transition? And the same thing for Ramon as well. I know we're running a little bit over time, but I really would like, I'm sure people would like the answer to that question of the doubt that you feel, and how do you overcome that? And I kind of would like to hear from most of you on the panel, if you can, because I think at different levels of your career, you handle doubt differently.
Yeah, so first off, you're always going to have doubt. If you take a role or an opportunity and you're not anxious about it, you're probably not going to be challenged, and it's probably not the right role for you. So there is a certain amount of healthy doubt, because as Ike said, that drives you, right? So Travis had said, people would tell me, oh, you've never done a P&L, you've never managed people. What the hell is a P&L? I'm going to go sit down and, is that all that's a P&L? I think I can understand that. If I can memorize the top 200 drugs, I can memorize a P&L. And I can understand how to read a top line and a bottom line and whatever come in between. So, you know, again, I think healthy doubt is okay. Use it as a driver, you know, and don't let it cause you to freeze. So that's my advice. You know, you're gonna have doubt. That's okay. Just dive in. You know.
Okay. Anybody else would like to chime in?
I love the fact. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, you're right.
if you're not afraid, you should be afraid. And so for all the reasons that Drew outlined. With this, just one other piece to go back to, Yanni, is how, as you transition from different roles or different functions, different industries, what have you, is the one thing that you should always, first you should pinpoint, but then you should always look for it in the role, is figure out what your one true talent is. And we all have many talents, but the one thing that drives you, that you're passionate about, that really the common thread, when you can do many different things, but it's the common thread that connects all of those and makes you successful. Because once you figure that out, then you never look for a role. You look for roles that have that as a component, or that as a majority of the component. And I'll be honest and say it took me more than a decade to figure out what it was, and only in hindsight finding out what connected all these different functions and different industries that I'd worked in. And once I did, it made it easier to say no to things. It also made it easier for me to determine which things to say yes to. And there's no single path to any position. Ultimately, your path is your path. And so as long as you're being true to who you are and what you're about, and yes, you have to network, you have to do all these other things. And as I learned just a moment ago, I've known Drew for 18 years, but the person who brought him to France was my boss at P&G. I didn't know that until right now. So there's a lot that you can learn from your networks.
I love that. And I think it's so important you said that, because honestly, pharma and pharmacy in general, the world is so small. I mean, Bassirat spoke at Ramon's school. Drew and Travis went to school together. Well, not school, but they had a fellowship at Eli Lilly together. Well, Wichita and I, we were at Novo. and also I went to school with EK. So I think that, remember that your network is really not out of reach. It's really right there. You just got to tap into it. I know we have so many questions. One question for EK, because it's important that we answer. Why the move from bulge bracket to BMO? Is that something that you want to answer, EK?
First and foremost, I want the record to show that I was quite scared that there were going to be 0 questions about finance, and I've been very dismayed. But to answer that question, it's quite simple. They're going to pay me more money. But to be a little more expansive with my answer, it's a constellation of reasons. I think one of the bigger things is it's kind of like accelerator, right? Because something that you see on the pharma side in terms of, somebody might stay in a position for maybe 2-3 years and they get promoted to AD, or then they move to another company, another pharma company, and they get a better position after 1 year. So it's kind of like a career accelerator. Going from a bulge bracket, it's on my resume, right? And I can kind of tout that a bit. Just like if one worked at Pfizer, it's on your resume. You can kind of show off a little bit. And it also gives you a set of experiences that one might not get at a smaller firm. BMO, while it is a smaller firm, it's still a sizable firm, like one of the biggest ones in Canada. And again, now that I'm at a higher position, I don't know, I might stay here for another 2-3 years, go the analyst role somewhere else, and then continue to level up, so to speak, from there. And again, this is something that, when you in pharma, somebody who is at a small biotech company, because I get this question a lot about people who are kind of transitioning jobs on the pharma side. How long should I stay at BMS? How long should I stay at Merck? I feel like I'm doing the same thing over and over again, spinning my wheels, and so on and so forth. It's very attractive for a small biotech company who doesn't really have the know-how in terms of getting an immunotherapy like Keytruda through regulatory and through clinical trial. So you can leverage that experience, the X number of years that you're at, said large pharma, take that with you and transition into a lot more prominent position. And your skill set that you learned and that you kind of became disenchanted over time at, again, large pharma, you can utilize it to really meaningfully help out that small biotech company that just doesn't have those capabilities or that know-how, and they also pay you a large sum of money.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. One more question in terms of an online MBA versus an in-person MBA for those that have MBA, because I'm actually curious
It
myself.
depends what you want to get out of the experience. At the end of the day, your degree is 3 letters on your resume. You know, you'll probably get exposure to the same content, but I intentionally went in person despite having small children and being a pain in the butt to get in and out of campus, because you develop the relationships at a deeper level. And it gets you out of the house, so you don't have to put the kids to bed. But you know, it was a lot more enriching beyond the content delivered to do in person. But you know, it also, there's so many factors that go into what's right for you.
What about you, Drew?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think as Wichita said, you know, it depends on your circumstance. It depends on what you're trying to get out of it, what stage you are. Personally, I think an on-campus, even if it's a part-time experience, just really expands your horizons. There's something to be said with being with a group of peers in an MBA course doing a project, right? I just don't think there's any good substitute for that. But again, it depends, right?
Awesome. So as we wrap up, if you have any last words or just kind of tell us what's next for you, and just kind of, you know, I know that for those that were early in your career, asking what's next is too early maybe, or if not too early, then it's, I don't know. But for those that are kind of already established in their career, what is next for you? I think that's exciting to hear. And then we will wrap up.
Mm-hmm. All right, maybe I'll go first. You know, I turned 40 a few years ago, and when I turned 40, I had one of these oh crap moments, like what on earth have I done with my life so far? And I almost transitioned out of the industry. I looked at health impact investing, right, similar to what EK is doing. Similar to the industry that EK is in. So for me, you know, I've just learned about the importance of leading and managing teams and people. So I'm very interested in developing people, helping them be successful what they're doing now or what they want to go do in the future. So I'm sure, you know, I'll continue to lead teams, you know, with varying levels of responsibility. But again, as long as I'm doing those 3 things, having fun, having impact, and growing, I can be working at Starbucks, right? It's the same principles of what's the purpose, what's the vision, what's your goal, and so you know, I'm very excited about that, and I might indeed look at the financial industry. It's something that I've been looking at for a while.
Come on over, Drew. We need you.
What about you, Travis?
You know, it's a great question, and I'd love to have a really sharp answer, but I'll give you a couple different answers. One is, and I'm probably going to put fun at the front end of what I'm going to, of what Drew had said, is that's what's most important to me. Is am I surrounded by good people, surrounded by my team? I would imagine the rest of my career in pharma, I will be leading functions. And so as part of that, it's all about it really begins and ends with the people. If you've got good people, a strong team, I mean, they will run through walls if they trust you, if they believe in the vision and the direction that you're setting. And that's critical. And what I found is I get better and better at that all the time, of being able to set that and be able to inspire and build the trust. What now that I reflect back, that hasn't always been the case. And so I've still got a lot of growing and growth to put into that space. And so I look forward to that. On the flip side is I have a rental business. We have 20 some units now and are continuing to grow that. And so part of the pharmaceutical side funds that end, and depending on how that goes, maybe that's my retirement. And so I'll move from one business enterprise to a different business enterprise. that will hopefully continue to grow as well. So. But I'm
Awesome.
not quite ready to retire, so I still need to do the other stuff until I can do that.
Awesome, awesome. And I see that we have a couple of entrepreneurs on this call, but thank you so much for your time today. We're exactly 10 minutes over, and I do appreciate you being considerate enough to not tell me, Yanni, stop. Okay, I gotta go. I know that there are 2 debates happening or town halls happening, so very grateful that you all attended. You stayed the entire time. And it was, a great conversation that I'm sure a lot of us learned from each other and also the audience. I would say Pills, like we said, it's an organization that's there to uplift and empower others. And seeing you guys transition, it kind of inspires and really makes it very visibly apparent that it is possible for people to transition. It is possible without a degree, and kind of really shows us that our PharmD is really versatile. So we appreciate it. We have a program called Pharmacy Ambassadors, so I hope that you guys would join to allow our members to be kind of have access to you all, but LinkedIn is always there, as we mentioned. So I hope you have a great night, and thank you so much for being on the panel today. Thank you, Ike, as well. I mean, Ike as well. I can't see you, but I'm sure you're maybe smiling. So.